This is Isaac Fletcher's front door.
Isaac Fletcher's front door.
Right.
That's right. And you can see above the porch, you can see that little tiny lead plaque which has got his initials on it. F for Fletcher, I for Isaac, and S for his wife, Susanna. It's lead because he did some mining of lead on his land here at Underwood. Underwood is just, about 4 miles outside Cockermouth in West Cumberland on the edge of the Lake District. This is his house, one of those nice square Georgian farmhouses that are a lot in West Cumberland, showing, I think, the wealth that farmers had at that time.
They were rich.
They were rich not so much from the land, but because of West Cumberland's business connections to America and to Ireland.
Yeah.
So it was a flourishing time. Isaac Fletcher was born in 1713 and he died in 1781. And from 1756 to the end of his life, he kept a diary, like a modern pocket diary, and he just recorded what he was doing every day. Now, some of it is very dry stuff about his business affairs, but he also records what's going on the farm, and he records the weather. He's very interested in the weather. So you get really quite a wonderful picture of farming life 250 years ago.
And it's that farming life that's brought historian Angus Winchester and, well, I suppose he would have been Isaac's neighbour, Farmer Mark Clark, together revisiting some of Isaac's highs and lows as documented in that diary.
Monday, 17th of December, 1778. Did not go to Cockermouth, very wet in the forenoon. Peter threshing oats in upper barn.
And this is that very barn.
This is the barn, we think. It is a large building next to the farmhouse, a long barn, very typical of the farms around here. We think it was the one that was built in 1757, because Isaac talks about building his barn. And in those days, you didn't go along to the builder's merchant and get yourself a whole lot of blocks. You went up into the gill behind here and felled a few oak trees for the timbers. You went over to Pardshaw Crag, the limestone outcrop about a mile away, got some coin stones. He got 6 cartloads of coins, he talks about. You brought in your masons and your wrights. And then when you're ready to put the roof timbers up, you've got everybody together, all the local neighbours would all come together, and you'd have what was called a timber raising. Everybody helped to get those timbers up, and it became a sort of communal event.
I would think these sort of projects come from money from elsewhere. Agriculture wouldn't pay for this.
No. But he thinks it's worth investing the money from elsewhere into the farm. I mean, this would be a sort of state-of-the-art barn when it was built in the 1750s.
I mean, just looking at this walling work here, look how small that stone is. What we call pinel, it would be near top. You wouldn't have to quarry so hard for it, but very slow building, like. To get a foot done, how many stones have you got in a foot there? Just that design there where the roof timbers meet the wall and that big slab that comes out and sits on it. We have similar designs on our farm. You can see where there's been a hay loft and then your stable and your byre underneath, and then what we would call for the gang, you forked hay down the gang to the bottoms.
And it was the way of farming really that continued until very recently, wasn't it? I mean, basically reliance on hay.
Wednesday, 14th of June, 1773. Mowing the remainder of Undergarth Meadow and begun the Corn Close Meadow. Friday the 16th, a very hot day. Housing hay. Cut all the Undergarth and Corn Close meadows this day, 11 cartload. Very dry and fine hay.
Hay would be a lot easier made then. Crops would be light. When we think of cutting grass now, we think of a thick sward, heavy in the bottom. When they say mowing, it would all be mowed by scythe.
It'd be mowed by scythe.
Yeah.
There's 1 or 2 references in the diary to reseeding with grass seed. They're not ploughing up meadows. I mean, the meadows will be natural.
Yeah.
So there won't be lots of ryegrass.
No, it would be what we call dead on its feet to start with, just about. It would be easy made, they would mow it and it would be a nice light swath. Whereas nowadays when you're making hay, if you're not at it twice a day, every day for a week, you're never going to get it made into hay.
Yeah.
We followed the beck down to Corn Close, rather a crucial field in Isaac's farming enterprise.
Yes, each of the farms, if we go back to Isaac Fletcher's time, each of the farms around here was maybe about 50 acres or so, or in Isaac's case, because he had 2 farms that were run together at Underwood, there was about 100 acres. What they consisted of was a group of smallish fields close to the farmstead, which were the ones that were cropped fairly regularly, plus other land further away, either uphill or the meadows running down to the wet, boggy peat moss. And Corn Close, as its name suggests, was his main arable field. And you find from the diary, you can work out what's happening with a field like corn close, and he's cropping it about 4 or 5 years in a row, and then he's putting it down to grass for another 3 or 4 years, and then coming back again.
And in terms of what Isaac was growing, a lot of potatoes, oats, barley.
Yes.
Pretty different to what you would grow.
Yeah, we predominantly grow grass now. We used to grow Swedes. We would grow 15 to 20 acres of Swedes and then sow barley after it. When we were trying to make hay, Swedes worked in well because if it was a bad summer, i.e. wet, you always had a hell of a crop of Swedes. You had black hay and Swedes, you know, but you always had something to go at, yeah. And then, of course, big Bill Salis did away with all that. You just grow grass.
Yeah.
I sometimes wonder now, these little parcels of better land, is that White House would be built there? Because it's handy. All your cattle's in byre, you haul and muck by hand. It's just easier, isn't it?
Yeah. You've got lime to sweeten things, but you've really only got the muck bred on the farm. But you didn't have any artificials. You didn't even have things like rock phosphate and guano and things that come in the Victorian period. They're beginning to drain at this stage, and Isaac Fletcher actually describes what were very, very early drainages, before the days of clay drainage pipes, but they had either wood drains or stone drains, and he's doing that. Very labour intensive it must have been. Yeah.
Those stone drains, like it. I don't know how the hell did they do it all, like cart and stone on wet land.
On wet land, I know. It's amazing. They're doing it sort of, I mean, fairly consistently. He seems to have a plan, I think, when you look at his diary. You know, he's draining these fields this year and he's moving on the next. He's quite determined. I mean, it's a sort of gradual process, isn't it, this agricultural change? People experiment and some people go and jump in at the beginning and then other people wait and see what happens and gradually everything changes.
You look over the dike at neighbour and go, well, that's worked a treat. We're going to have a go at that. You go, look at him, he's made a right.
He's wasted all his money on that.
We're not doing that. When you're looking back here now, it was well named Underwood. It's in the shade. It's in bottom of a bank, trees growing up the bank. Sun never hits it.
It's right on the edge. The farms in Mozza sort of stretch uphill, don't they, really, from Underwood? Underwood's almost the lowest farm.
Yeah.
And then beyond the farms, you can see in the distance the snow on the fells over there. And there was a chunk of fell that belonged to Mozza that was known as Mozza Fell. So they had their own bit of common land up there, which remained open and unenclosed until about 1860-something. So in Isaac's day, you have that as a shared resource, and you had their own fields around each farm.
And up on those slopes is where Isaac would have used the resource of the fell land for his sheep.
Yes. The sheep, I think, as far as you can tell from the diary, spend pretty well all their time up on the fell. He doesn't really talk about lambing time very much, interestingly. He talks about clipping and washing, and then he talks about topping time in November, before which you salved the sheep.
Thursday, 18th November, 1779. 4 sheep salvers here. The number of sheep in all is 49, and generally in pretty good order.
Salving would be a precursor to sheep dipping, and just to keep lice and ticks and...
It was a mixture of butter and tar,
Yeah.
and you spread it
Fennels.
down through the fleece onto the skin.
Yeah.
Very slow, time-consuming job.
Well, and of course the wool
Yes.
was the main thing.
Yes, they're a wool flock, and if you look at the diaries, he has about 50 sheep, and of those 50 sheep, I think it's about 20 are wethers, and they're keeping the wethers for the wool. He's not exactly buying and selling large numbers of sheep. It's just a sort of a steady state, really.
Yeah,
wool
they
flock.
just seem to be there. Well, they would butch some for themselves, likely.
But the wool was his main source of income from his sheep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Totally the opposite end of the scale to how things are now.
Well, in my grandfather's day, wool was still worth a lot of money. It would pay rent. If you were on a rented spot, the wool clip paid the rent. But not one of them pay shearers now, eh?
He had cattle as well.
He did, yes. And I think the cattle are probably more important to him, really, as sort of part of the farming enterprise. They always have one cow that they keep and slaughter before Christmas.
Yeah.
And that's for their own sake. But the thing that brings the money in is the tallow and the hide. The tallow and the hide are then taken off to Cockermouth to the market the following week. So that's a sort of regular event. And then across the year, he's buying and selling cattle. They're breeding calves, obviously, on the farm. He's also selling calves. He's also buying other cattle in here and there. And the process of buying and selling cattle is really quite complex in the 18th century. It's obviously long before the days of auction.
Yeah, he doesn't just go to the auction, does he?
But he'd still go to Cockermouth.
Yeah.
Not to the auction, but to the beast fair. And that would be where a lot of the trade would take place. But then there are lots of other references in the diary to a chap called John Jackson, who is described as the Ulverston beast buyer. So he's a chap from Ulverston on the south side of Cumbria, and he's coming up and buying stock They're then walking them from here down to, well, Isaac walks them down to Ennerdale Bridge, which is about how far? About 10 miles maybe? So it looks as though this John Jackson is buying up stock here, and it's all part of this flow of cattle south.
Wednesday, 2nd June 1773. Went to the beast fair. Cattle sold very well. Sold one 5-year-old geld heifer for £6 to Postlethwaite for Jackson. A very hot, sultry day.
When it came to the buying and the selling of the cattle, there was certainly plenty of haggling. Went on. Some heated debate, reading between the lines.
Well, if you're selling something, you always had an inflated opinion of what it was worth, and fella was looking to make a bob or two out of you, wasn't he? And as long as you understand that and you let him make just a little bit, not a lot, because you want him to come back, don't you? He wants you to keep breeding them, so you strike a balance.
The rules of agricultural commerce were ever thus.
I think they were.
No,
I think you'll be able to deal with Isaac, Mark.
Breaking the ice in the water trough below Underwood, and my goodness, that ice is thick.
Ice is thick, and we've had, only 3 or 4 nights of frost, haven't we? As Mark says, it never gets the sun down here.
No.
So it's frozen solid.
And it brings to mind some of the most memorable entries when it comes to weather.
He's writing at a time at the end of what's often referred to as the Little Ice Age. The weather got a lot worse in about the 1300s, and it stayed colder than it is, well, even in the most of the 20th century, through till about 1800 or so. And yes, the ice and the cold weather and the snow is a real feature of Isaac Fletcher's diary. And he talks quite frequently about the lakes freezing over, and particularly Mochakin Tarn, which isn't very far from here, and the Lake of Loweswater, and the family go and skate. That's a major feature. And he's also very vivid about the effects of ice on just everyday life. So in January 1780, when he was an old man, and it's a really hard January, and it stays frozen for days on end, and he talks about the frost got into the house, and it froze the piss in the pots under the beds, he says. It's really sort of vivid stuff.
Saturday, 1st January 1780. The new year begins with sharp frost and very cold weather. John and William gone to the tarn to skate. It being now froze over some time.
I wonder what he would make of us poring over his diary now, dissecting it almost, revisiting it.
That's a really interesting question, because the thing that I think is so fascinating about diaries is that you know that the person who's writing them doesn't know what's going to happen the next day.
No.
But then you ask the question, well, why is Isaac Fletcher writing it? Is it just as a sort of memo so that he's got a list of what happened through the year? Or is he expecting it not to be published maybe? But, I mean, the diary passed on through to his descendants. One of them then gave it to Carlisle Library. So it's the original diaries in Carlisle Library. And we published an edition of it 30 years ago.
I mean, Angus used to come and work with us on a Saturday morning when he was finding all this stuff out. First of all, he'd say, "Hello, Mark, how are you doing now? What's happened this week?" And I'll tell him what cow had died and how many lambs we'd got and all this. "And what have you been up to?" And he would start telling us all these marvellous stories he'd discovered. And I used to find it so interesting, like, yeah.
I found it interesting the other way around, because, having read all this stuff from a couple of hundred years ago, and I was looking at other, even earlier stuff as well, talking to Mark and his dad really sort of brought it alive as to what it actually meant on the ground.
Yeah.
Farming Today was produced and presented by me, Helen Millican, with thanks to Tim Barker for reading the words of Isaac Fletcher.